Call this meeting to order. Document the time at 6:35. If you join me with the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome and thank you for joining us. January 10 already. And Tori, if you would launch us into a mindfulness and bring us to here and now.
Here. All right, so we're going to get settled in our seats. We're going to take a deep breath in and breathe out. Take another deep breath in and out. On the inhale, we're focusing where we are now, and we're relaxing into the space. You're just going to find a regular breathing pattern to sort of settle in and integrate every place and all the things you've come from to arrive here. And as we found a way to integrate where we've come from, we are now opening up to be able to focus on what's best for the Winooski community, families, and students that we're here to govern for. So take another couple deep breaths in for the focus. May we all attain great awareness and see in complete clarity as we discuss our organization. And on your next, last round of inhale, exhale, we can get ready to govern.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, agenda review and adjustments. Any adjustments anybody would like? Thing different. Okay, we do have a couple of handouts as we go along. One is a minor adjustment on a policy that was sent out in the package, but we'll get to those when we do. All right, focus on learning tonight. Roland and Bar Foundation grants. Lindsay. We're gonna kick this right off. All right.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
My name's Lindsay Cox. I know many of you. There are a couple that I don't know, so it's really nice to meet you and be able to present for you this morning. Thank you so much for having me. I know that we just left our mindfulness moment, but what I would like to do is just take us back there for a minute so that we can put ourselves in the right headspace for this presentation, which is going to be very different than some of the really fun policy and budget stuff that you will also be working on this evening.
Wouldn't recognize the fact that she's on the school board.
So, if you could put yourself back in your moment of mindfulness just for a minute. To take a deep breath in and extend your spine up by lifting the crown of the head towards the ceiling and grounding through your tailbone. And then I want you to think about something that you're looking forward to. And as you put that in the forefront of your mind, notice what happens to your breath. Notice what happens to your body. Maybe it's the relaxation of the shoulders away from the ears, or the tongue away from the roof of the mouth. And then just log that into your memory. that slight shift in the body and in the mind when you think about something that gets you really excited, something you're looking forward to. And then go ahead and open your eyes and come back into the room for the presentation. We're going to return to that thing that you logged in your memory at the end, so just keep it there, hold it there. So I'm going to start with, let's see if this works. I didn't test that. Awesome. I'm going to start with a couple goals for the presentation this evening. Goal number 1, these are the goals that I'm hoping that in the next 20 minutes or so you will be able to walk away with and walk out into our community and be able to articulate to our voters. The first is being able to articulate what the Rowland Foundation Fellowship is and what the work that's happening here at Winooski is. Being able to talk about a few of the example pilots that we're going to be kicking off this second semester. This is particularly timely with budget season because I often find that voters are excited to hear about something really tangible, an example, something cool that's unique and different that's happening here in Winooski that might not be happening elsewhere, something that's kind of an entry point into the work of the school and students and teachers, and especially this budget season where I think many towns and Winooski probably as well are seeing tax rate increases. It's nice to have an example of something you can point to that's innovative happening here in Winooski. And then I also want to talk about the potential future implications or impacts of this work. And I say potential because we're really at the beginning of everything, and so I put this in your mind so in a year or 18 months when I get to come back and talk to you again about some of our findings, nothing will be a surprise. Before I move any further, I just want to introduce myself a little bit more, especially to those of you who don't know me. I wear a lot of hats here in Winooski. I am a Rowland Fellow this year. I'm also an iLab teacher, and I have an English endorsement, so that's my teaching background. I teach in our iLab program at the high school level, so I help students pursue independent projects and design their own learning experiences. I'm also the high school advisory coordinator, so this year we have advisory, and in April you get to see me again, and I'll come back and tell you all about that program and its hopeful successes that I'll be able to document with lots of fun data. And another piece that's important for this work is that for the 4 years prior to working here at Winooski, I was the project manager for the Partnership for Change, which was a grant effort between the Winooski and Burlington school districts. So I came in to Winooski with a lot of background experience and relationships that have been built over 4 years of working between 2 districts and then coming to work here full time. So that's a little bit about who I am, and I'm going to use some of these roles and the hats that I wear to describe and talk about some of the work that is happening with the Rowland Foundation Fellowship. So, Rowland Fellowship, what is it? The Rowland Foundation was founded by Barry and Wendy Rowland. They really wanted to support educational innovation in the state of Vermont, so they created this foundation in order to award teacher fellowships. They've been awarding fellowships since 2008, and so they are entering into the 10th year of this. Part of this was kind of the brainchild of a man named Chuck Scranton, who's the current executive director of the Rowland Foundation. He was the principal of Burr and Burton Academy at the time, and the Rowlands had students who went to that school, so they had a good relationship, and he pitched this idea to them. And the concept is that the change that we need for our schools should come from the inside, and that happens on 2 levels. 1, the inside being teachers, the people who are doing the work day to day, and then 2, the inside meaning from the actual organization, the belief that the expertise that we need to do innovative and creative stuff for our schools, and then further increase the impact for our students, we have. We just need to figure out how to access it. And so what a Rowland Fellowship does is it really allows a teacher or team of teachers time and space to do some design and do some thinking, do some research and development for new systems that could have great impact on the school. So back in 2016, I applied for the Rowland Fellowship, and it was awarded, and I am a technically 2017 Rowland Fellow. What that means is that 2017 is when this work started, but it is in no means when this work ended. So a little bit of a timeline of what a Roland Fellowship looks like. The first year of the Roland Fellowship, which is the current school year we're in, FY18, is an award of $75,000. What I have chosen to do with that $75,000 includes a halftime release for the entirety of the year. Some fellows choose to be released for like the entire first semester and then go back to their teaching duties or do a variety of different things in terms of the way that they use the time. My decision to do a halftime release is really connected to the fact that I think it's really important to stay connected to this place, to students and to teachers while I'm doing this work. And so I wanted to make sure I had a presence in the building all the time. The first year is really about R&D. It's about research and development. It's about seeing what's going on, where it's happening well, and thinking about how to bring ideas back. It's about things like site visits, about pilots. It's about trying stuff out. Year 2, which would be FY19 for my fellowship, is continued use of the grant dollars. So the $75,000 is awarded in the first year, but it doesn't mean that that's when you have to use it. And there's not any planned intentional release time for the Roland Fellow, although I have some ideas about that. And it's really where the implementation and evaluation happens with more upscaled and larger pilots of the work. So that's a little bit just about the timeline of what happens with a Roland Fellow. And this year there are 10 Roland Fellows throughout the state of Vermont that make up the cohort that I'm a part of. Something really cool happened last summer that I didn't know about, and it was that Mr. McMahon was applying for a grant through the Barr Foundation, which is another foundation. They're out of Boston, who provide educational grant dollars to help innovative programs in schools. And he was working with a great partner called Two Revolutions, which is a educational consulting firm who are based in Burlington but work nationally across the country, helping agencies of education, school districts, and individual schools innovate and design new ways of learning and assessment in their schools. And in October of this past year, Winooski was awarded a planning grant from the Barr Foundation. So why this is so cool and why I'm the one telling you about it is because the work of the Barr Foundation grant is to develop a wider ecosystem for learning. The award is $250,000. It's a planning grant for 18 months. Our grant partner, Two Revolutions, are experts in this field, and they're connected, both locally and nationally. And this really is perfectly aligned with the work that I am doing for the Roland Fellowship. And I know I haven't told you what it is yet. That's very intentional. The other really cool thing about this grant is that it allows for me to think about the Roland dollars a little differently because of the added source of monies to use and put towards this project. So it's going to allow for this potential extension into year 2 of this Roland Fellowship to really do this right? Oftentimes in education we are on this calendar and we're on this timeline and we have to get things done, and the urgent is never necessarily the long-term important. And so this is really exciting because it allows us to really take our time and figure out how to do this well for students at Winooski. So, what is the work? What is it that we're doing? What is Flexible Pathways in Winooski High School? Before I throw that pitch, there's just like one more piece of wind-up that I need to do. One of the roles that I mentioned that I held was as the Partnership for Change project manager, and that was another large grant that was awarded to, that was another large grant that was awarded from a foundation to Winooski and to Burlington in partnership, and I really got to be kind of in the center of all of that work, and so there are a lot of lessons that I learned through that role. And I get to use those lessons now in implementing both the Roland Fellowship and a part of the Barr Foundation grant here in Winooski. So lessons that are pretty straightforward things like students are our greatest allies, fail early and fail often, communication is key, but most importantly, that our words really matter. And so one of the things that we need to do before we can move further into me actually talking about what this work looks like here is talk about flexible pathways and what those words mean and define them for ourselves here in Winooski, because they mean different things in every different school district in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, the region, the country. So flexible pathways is the term that we are going to use here in Winooski. You may have heard it called different things like ELOs, which sometimes stand for Extended Learning Opportunities, ILOs, which sometimes stand for Independent Learning Opportunities, IS, which stands for Independent Study. There's lots of ways that people talk about this work. What we're going to do here in Winooski is use the phrase flexible pathways. There's a few reasons for that. The first reason is that that's what the state uses. So I hope that you're familiar with Act 77, that is the flexible pathways legislation. The way that Act 77 defines flexible pathways is flexible pathways to graduation means any combination of high quality academic and experiential components leading to secondary school completion and post-secondary readiness, which may include assessments that allow the student to apply his or her knowledge and skills to tasks that are of interest to that student. So really clear, we know exactly what to do based on this. The language is very inclusive, which is one of the reasons I like it, but the current definition that we're using here in Winooski is this, that a flexible pathway is a learning experience that allows students to demonstrate proficiency towards graduation and that happens outside of a regularly scheduled class. So, this definition is very much about everything being in and nothing being out. It's about being as inclusive as possible as we start to build this system so that we don't put any barriers or roadblocks in our way unintentionally. It's about getting rid of the language of can't or shouldn't or wouldn't or don't, and really using that positive and affirming yes and mentality. And so we have learning experiences here at the school, and they're powerful in the form of courses. And those courses take a lot of different shapes and formats, but there's a very clear system through which a student demonstrates proficiency for taking a class. When I applied for the Roland Grant back in 2016, what I applied to do was to design a system of assessment for flexible pathways. What I am now doing is designing a system for flexible pathways. And there's a little bit of a difference there that's important. So this is the system that is currently being designed for flexible pathways. It has 5 key components, and assessment, you'll notice, is just one of them. And this is a way that my thinking has expanded a lot over the past year as I've started to do some of this thinking. So the idea is, and this is from the student perspective, that to engage in a flexible pathway, which you'll remember is a learning experience that's going to happen outside of a class, all of these 5 pieces need to occur well in alignment and in communication with lots of different people in order for it to happen. And in order for that flexible pathway, that learning experience, to allow the student to demonstrate proficiency towards graduation. And that's our goal. Exposure is key. A lot of times students don't even know what is available to them outside of a regularly scheduled class. Engagement, meaning being able to ask questions, learn about the actual experience, figure out if it works for them, how it could help their learning path, how it connects to their goals, their interests, their strengths. Planning. It takes a lot of planning to figure out how to do something that's not just a class that you schedule in your every other block schedule. Support that would happen throughout the actual experience, and then the assessment of how are we actually assessing what does the student know and what can they do that demonstrates proficiency in one of our graduate proficiencies, our GPs, or our GXs, our graduate expectations, that allows us as educators to kind of sign off that they can move forward towards graduation. So this is the system that my role in fellowship, the Bar Foundation grant, and a whole host of other components are working towards building. One of the reasons that this system is so critical, that communicating this system is so critical, is that it connects to everything else that we do. So it connects to personal learning plans, it connects to advisory, it connects to graduation and graduation requirements, it connects to how students sign up for classes, how they're supported, it connects to teachers and what their roles look like and what time of day they do those roles and how often and how frequently, and it connects all the way up to the board level, which we'll get to, which is coming next. So the main research question that I'm looking at right now is this. What should a system of flexible pathways look like that supports students to demonstrate proficiency for learning that happens outside of classes? And just this afternoon, it was a half day today in Winooski, so students were only with us till 12:15, and teachers had in-service in the afternoon. So just this afternoon, the entire high school faculty, along with 20 high school students, started to tackle this question together. Up to this point, I've been working with a smaller team of teachers and students who have been giving me some input and feedback on the direction of the work, and today was really the big rollout for the entire faculty. And so what happened this afternoon is that, similar to right now, I did a kind of stand and deliver type presentation that introduced the work, and then faculty and students broke up into small groups, and they got to talk about the pilots that are going to be happening second semester. And this is where hopefully it's going to start to make sense. So if you're sitting there still thinking like, I have no idea what she's talking about, hopefully after the next couple of slides you're going to be back on board. So semester 2 pilots. I'm a big believer in design thinking, the idea of rapid prototyping, that we can't design something that's perfect until we actually test it out. So one of the components of the fellowship is actually testing out flexible pathways. And so I have a group of students who are going to fly an airplane that we build while they are flying it second semester and help us figure out what it looks like to have a learning experience outside of the classroom. One of the ways that I found these students was to figure out where students are doing learning outside of classes already. So I went to where they're excited, where they're engaged, where they're already interested and passionate about, and I said, you want to try and get credit for this? And the answer was yes. So there are 5 main pilots that are happening second semester. The first one is through a club called Peace Jam. This is an after-school club. It develops leadership and promotes positive influence, helps students promote positive influence in their school and community. Peace Jam is an international organization that has clubs and chapters nationally, regionally, and locally. We have a huge population of students who do Peace Jam here in Winooski. It's one of our only after-school clubs. They meet weekly. They do work here in the community. They travel to Connecticut to go to the National Peace Jam Conference. They traveled to New York City in the fall to go to the UN Day of Peace. They do a lot of work, and a lot of the work that they do falls under our culture and community graduate expectation. And so I'm going to be working with a few of the students and the Peace Jam advisor this second semester to figure out what it looks like for students in Peace Jam to actually be able to demonstrate proficiency towards our cross-cultural engagement GP through that work. It's work that they're doing, it's work they're excited about and passionate about, and so that's one of the places that we're going to start. Another place we're going to start, and this connects to the idea that flexible pathways and should be connected to our community and have real-world relevance, is with the transportation pilot. So you all are very aware that on Tuesday there are buses starting to pick up kids in the morning. And so I've connected with our community partner, Parents and Youth for Change, who've helped support and advocate for that. And we are going to be having 2 high school students who are going to ride the bus. They're going to collect some data. They're going to do some interviews and try to analyze the impact of that bus and on the students and the families. So that is exciting because it's work that's happening kind of in conjunction with where the kids would already be. So these are students who would potentially be utilizing the bus anyways. They're going to be there. They are both individuals who are looking for a strong senior project. So they're going to be using this for senior project, which is in the high school our communication capstone. So these students will be using this experience to fulfill one of their capstone requirements for the high school in the GX of communication. The Hero Club is a new club that started. AHAC is an organization that stands for something about health education. And they have been coming to Winooski and meeting with a group of students after school once a month. They're providing basically a science class that's really focused around health careers. And so the students in that class, through both the attendance of that class, the completion of a project, and if they do both those things, they are eligible to attend for free a 1-week camp at UVM called MedQuest this summer. We'll be looking at completing one of their well-being capstones and our human body graduate proficiency. So they're going to be using that experience, not necessarily in lieu of science, because all of the kids who are in Hero Club love science and will take as many science classes as possible, but as an opportunity where they were doing this learning, they were excited and passionate about it. It's happening outside of their school day, outside of their class structure. But we've been working with AHAC, their organization, as they develop their rubrics and standards so that they align with our graduate proficiencies. Another example is the Role and Design team, and this one should be of specific interest to the school board because the Role and Design team is the team that I meet with once a month. This pilot is basically about what does it look like for a student to participate in an ongoing school or community committee. So I'm not going to pick on Alex right now because as a senior, he's super set for graduation, didn't need to add anything to his plate this spring. But in the future, I would hope that students sitting on the school board would be an opportunity for that student to use this as a flexible pathway as they demonstrate proficiency. Same thing with being a lot of communication with the town. They're always looking for students to sit on committees and are really interested in having more student engagement in committees. So the idea that this pilot is really about what does it look like for a student to have a role in a committee that's influencing their school and their community. It's outside of school though. Another example of this would be the Facilities Committee. I think it's called Facilities Committee, the one that's looking at the redesign of the facility.
Capital Project Committee.
Capital Planning Improvement Project. So as that project moves forward, the idea that there would be a way for students who engaged with that or joined and sat on that committee to be demonstrating proficiency would also kind of fall under this bucket. And then the last one, we have a couple high school students who weekly tutor JFK students in music lessons. And so that's another example of a way they're contributing to their school community, a way they're using their knowledge, their education. Performing arts is one of our graduate proficiencies. And so that's one aspect of what these students are doing. And so we're going to be working with those students to figure out how they can be moving towards both their performing arts graduate proficiency as well as their persistence capstone. So these are students who are very interested in music. Outside of tutoring, they do private lessons, they're part of the Vermont Youth Orchestra, they're in band, so this is a passion of theirs, and the persistence capstone is something that all of that work can collectively move towards. So these are those tangible examples, these are those things that are happening that we're going to be doing second semester, and I can't really tell you exactly what it's going to look like because we're just starting to answer that question. But I'm a big believer of answering that question while we're doing it. So that's what's happening here in Winooski at the high school second semester with regards to flexible pathways. On to goal number 3. What is the impact or potential impact of this at the board level? All of the things I'm going to share with you right now are guesses. They're just thinking about where you as board members can really engage with this work. I know a lot of what I shared is fun to know about, and it's great to be able to talk about in the community, but as far as a board that operates on policy governance, where the greatest impact that you all could have on really helping support this work and further it, they're going to be in a couple of different areas. The first one, and most fun, are budget implications. So this work definitely has budget implications. Luckily, we have a Roland Fellowship grant and we have a Bar Foundation grant that are going to take us through the next 18 months of doing this work. The Bar Foundation grant is also exciting because it is just a planning grant, and we will have an opportunity to apply for an implementation grant through the Bar Foundation that could continue to bring money in to support this work. So I'm not putting all my eggs in the local funds basket, but I am a believer that the sooner you start to transition grant monies that are supporting innovative projects that you want to stick around into local funding, the better. So I want to put that on your radar early, that there are some budget implications here. And the two main areas that I see those budget implications in are staffing and transportation. It takes a lot of human capacity to do this work. The most tangible example I can give you is from Montpelier High School. They've been developing their Flexible Pathways office for about 7 years now. They currently have 6 full-time teachers who do nothing but flexible pathways and 4 vans. So their high school is about double the size of ours, ish. And that's where they've come with their system of flexible pathways over the past 7 years. That's just one example. It doesn't mean that's what we're going to need here. But I do believe that staffing and transportation are probably the 2 main areas that will be of interest in terms of budget implications. And then the other part of it, and it's super exciting that Rebecca's here, has to do with insurance liability and risk. Through the iLab and my work as an iLab teacher, we've already had a conversation with VisBit, which is the insurer of school districts in the state of Vermont, in terms of what this means when students are doing things that aren't happening in school, in a classroom, during school hours. And so that's something that we'll need to think about. It's nothing that I have any answers for or that any lawyers can put forth any laws towards, because there's not really anything that currently exists. But obviously, if we're having students go out into the community, not be here during school hours, there are risks, and we need to be really cautious as we proceed and upfront and forward with those. And so the way that I see that potentially transitioning into board work is potentially through new policy or maybe revised policy, depending on where we go with it. So this is kind of a new frontier for education, especially for Winooski, when we think about what students, the potential of what students could be doing, where they could be going, who they could be working with. And I don't know what that will look like, but it may have an impact as far as new policy goes. Okay, almost done. Next steps. Where do we go from here as far as this work? The semester 2 pilots that I talked about. More research and development. So this spring, summer, and early fall, we're going to be doing some site visits to places regionally that are doing this work and doing it well. Those site visits will be open to teachers and students and board members, because I'm a strong believer that the board should have the opportunity to kind of engage and see what this looks like elsewhere, so that you can advocate both budgetarily and in the community for what our students need. So that's exciting. The design team for the Roland grant will continue to do their work throughout this spring. We will move forward aligning with our graduate expectation and graduate proficiency system as we figure out how we are assessing students through classes with GXs and GPs. We'll be able to translate that work into flexible pathways. And then a lot more with the BAR grant integration. So working with Two Revolutions, their expertise, their network is going to be really helpful, and continuing to have their support is going to just really make this work all the more robust.
And there's, just to add, there's, I think, 8 other sites that are also recipients of the Bar Foundation grant. We'll have our first cross-site meetings at the end of January down in Massachusetts. So it'll be interesting to also, you get to do a site visit in Cambridge, and we also get to hear about what the other sites are doing.
And these other sites are New England, national?
New England. Yep.
So, remember at the beginning when I had you do meditation again, mindfulness again? So, that continues to be the North Star for this work. It's the idea that that thing that you felt in your mind and your body when I asked you to think about something exciting, something that you were looking forward to, that's what I see in students who are doing some of this already. That's what I notice when they talk about what it is that they're excited about or why they even come to school. So that is really what is driving my continued engagement in this. I feel like, especially after this afternoon, we have a strong faculty engagement and excitement for doing this work and figuring this out. I had 20 students who showed up this afternoon when they could have been home sleeping or watching Netflix from 1 to 3 o'clock, and the only thing I gave them was cookies. So I think there's really strong interest in figuring this out and doing it well, and I'm excited that you all can help and be part of that and advocate as well. So that's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. And again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this with y'all.
Thank you, for sure.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming to help us, specifically to help articulate. We got so many good things going on here that understanding how to push that back out into the community so they understand too is definitely something we want to work with, we want to help with, and need to be armed to do. One of the, you hit on it right at the end. You said you're going to do some site visits with some places that are doing this work and doing it well. How do you know? From what you read?
Well?
Yeah. What are some of the indicators? And I'm going to take your answer back 2 years from now and look back in.
One of the things that I'm looking for when I'm looking for places for site visits is a developed program. So not one that's really nascent, but one that has been in existence for a number of years so that they can talk about the evolution of the program. And also with a developed program, you have usually the capacity of students who are engaged with it. So one example of a school that's been doing this work for 14 years is the Big Picture network of schools, but Big Picture Learning has a variety of schools all over the country. They have a school in Providence, Rhode Island called the Met, and at the Met, students do internships 2 days a week. They're not in school, they're out of the building doing internships. And so internships is one example of a flexible pathway, and that's a place I would go to learn specifically about that flexible pathway because they are the experts. And the data that they have regarding internships connects what students did in their internship to what they studied in college and to what they're actually doing as their careers. So they have some really great longitudinal data that you can look at that shows the impact of that internship, not just on kind of future planning, but on post-secondary aspirations. That's pretty compelling. So that would be one component. Another component is looking at schools who were designed specifically to do this work. So a lot of the schools that are doing this well are charter schools, and they're schools that are new. They were designed 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and they were designed with this in mind. And I think that can be really helpful in learning what it is that drives and motivates teachers and students who seek this out. And hearing those stories is going to help our students engage. So for me, if I were to come back in 18 months or 2 years to kind of report out on this, What I'd want you to ask me about is the number of students who are actually engaged in a flexible pathway. I would want you to ask me about how that flexible pathway influenced or informed their post-secondary plans. And potentially, although I don't quite know how this is going to be sorted yet, but the connection from that flexible pathway to the other education, the other learning experiences that they have. Because a lot of what the flexible pathways are doing are bringing what they're doing in classes kind of more to life. So it's the site tour that I took 6 students on at Global Foundries this fall, where they got to talk with this engineer about osmosis. Literally her whole job has to do with osmosis. And she talked about this science experiment that she did when she was a freshman in high school, where she learned about osmosis and how it works, and how literally everything that she does every day now has to do with, like, that was the genesis of what her current role is. And so just seeing the physical plant of that space was really impactful for students, but understanding that, like, there is a connection to what they do in class and what they might do in the real world is really important as well.
This is all really cool. The students are doing the research about the transportation pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be able to see those results and results maybe from some of the other pilots that are going on?
Absolutely.
And how?
Well, the students who are doing the pilot, I have told them that one of the possible places that they could demonstrate their learning is by presenting their results to the school board. So that would be really cool if you wanted to have them here for a little 10-minute presentation at the end of the semester. But they will be doing a written report, so we can also make that available.
Okay.
I would like to see it here. That would be great.
That's how you make this learning real.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I made a comment, is it would be nice for them to know now that that's something that we would like to see, because it's of
You all will have them.
close importance.
They will be here.
Okay.
Great presentation, kind of like makes me kind of connect a lot of the dots on what K through 12 uses as language in terms of, and then what higher ed. To follow up on like questions that Mike had asked, the 2 things that I would really like to kind of see in terms of measuring the progress and looking at other institutions that do this is really about the sustainability about these projects, but also figuring out a systematic way of collecting the learning outcomes from these projects that align with the learning outcomes of the proficiencies of the high school, so that it makes it a lot easier for us to kind of go, what are the activities, the learning experiences, the active learning that's going to happen? Because overall, what I like about this couple of the projects about what you're talking about is that it's experiential learning that kind of tries to get the students to take ownership of their learning and see the connections between the proficiency to the real world, and what we're always aiming for, which is almost exactly, if you think about it, fits the end's message, right? And the other part, if we can figure out as a board on the sustainability and be able to easily demonstrate the learning proficiency from this, it's one of the things that what gets me excited about this project is that it's one of those projects that, are we that unique out of all the other schools at Vermont? Are we unique in Vermont that we can actually start telling our voters, the people in our district, that this is a unique education and we're going to do it really well to draw in people? That's an easier sell in talking about the coolness about this project. And then just one final statement, because I'm a very systems person and I love your diagram. The only thing that I love when I look at systems is making sure that assessment has a feedback loop somewhere, so that and I think that will help when you do go up to the bar, when you talk about foundations, that there's this feedback loop that feeds back into the learning for the students so that they can readjust on what their next exposure could possibly be in terms of thinking about that next learning experience. Just something to think about and adding just in your systems diagram, because when you leave assessment at the bottom, It's like, you know, for a lot of us, we think, I always tell assessment is part of the process, it's not the end goal. And I think if we can get people to understand that cycle on that, it just makes a visual impact for people.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. It's really articulating it all. Sort of bringing it all around and connecting the whole thing. Moving.
Just leave it.
I think it's a cool movement from iLab, like the seed of iLab and how it's flowering in all these different ways in terms of different ways of doing school and finding passion and interest and being able to.
Well, I like the comment about just setting it up, getting going, and learning on the fly.
Yeah,
Is,
because sitting back and waiting for it to be perfect, we're going to be
right.
stuck.
Because Leon's first budget meeting saying
Yeah.
we're going to put the iLab in place. I said, what's an iLab? He says, I don't know yet. We're going to figure it out as we go. And so.
Well, and the other part I think to keep in mind is we're a pre-K-12 district, and while we were focusing on high school, there is intentionality and strategy behind the things that we are doing pre-K-8 in preparation for this environment. You know, so there's the project-based learning that's going on. There's a lot of the social, emotional support that's happening so that students are in a place to be able to do this higher level learning, deeper learning. The expeditions that are just happened with Circus Smirkus and that are happening in the middle school are fantastic this year. Actually came through a Flexible Pathways grant for the state level. So it's important that, especially in my role and in your role, that we keep our eyes on the pre-K-12 continuum and that it's coherent.
Well, what I loved about the expeditional learning that I just went to for the middle schoolers is that, what I've also noticed in project-based learning in elementary school, is there's a container that they get to have choices about, right? So they start to find it within something we're teaching. Like right now with the middle school, they just did working conditions, and everyone got to find what they were interested in and being able to highlight working conditions. P.S. Everyone has to drop their phones. You may not eat chocolate unless it's fair trade. Like, it was actually kind of alarming to go through it. Like, here's a whole list of clothing brands you cannot buy. I was like, oh my God, we're perpetuating the system. But the passion there, and I think that watching what you're saying, that extension to high school, which is, so what do you want it, like the container, I mean, it's a little, it's you're widening it up. And sometimes when you ask kids, like, what do you want? They're like, about what? Like, what do you want? You know, because we build them with preschools. Do you want to wear this to school or this to school? Right? You give them these sort of really, and it's kind of neat to see how project-based learning from elementary school and now this expeditionary learning, they're finding their passion within a context. But then high school, it's going to broaden up and they get to choose it. It's kind of wider, it's wide.
Hopefully because higher ed is now finally catching up with project-based learning.
Yeah.
Moving towards that, and one of the struggles is how do you get students to start taking ownership of the learning?
Right.
You see the shift in terms of the educational development where it doesn't go from teacher to student, kind of like the receptor model. It's where we're trying, in higher ed, you're really trying to move the student to become the owner of knowledge, right? And the creator of knowledge. And it's a very hard transition if we always have the traditional classroom setting from K through 12.
Because what I saw in that room was they owned what they studied. They taught me about something. So not only are they're owning it, and now they're passing it along. So now they're carrying the torch to, like, let me show you what the working conditions are for folks who make smartphones. You know, let me show you, like, here's the impact. Here's what you should be thoughtful about. Like, they're doing the teaching. So cool.
It's actually interesting because I've always said that, you know, we always promote in a lot of the mission of our education institutions to promote lifelong learners. And I always said that as a compliment, we should also say that we want to teach people to be lifelong teachers in some sense, because it kind of then also puts the ownership a little bit even more on the learning on their component. And it becomes easier actually to learn if you know that you're going to have to teach in some ways. So, thanks.
Good stuff.
Next public comments. Seeing none, we'll move to 5, consent agenda. I would accept a motion to accept the consent agenda as is.
So moved.
Any discussion topics? All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Consent agenda adopted. Executive limitations, section 6. First portion here, open up a discussion on a direct inspection of the warrant process that we ran into December, I think?
December, yeah.
Sometime in December. In signing of the warrants, came across one that was the signature of the approval for the expense was the signature of the person that incurred the expense. And that is supposed to go up to the supervisor for the signature. So, just gonna go in and look at the process. Well, I say I am gonna go in, we probably should assign. To go in and look at what is the process for, approving and, confirming that the dollars that were spent were done where they need to be, just to make sure they're square. One of the questions that came up with that is if the procedure is that the supervisor of the person incurring the expense signs to confirm, where does that go for Sean? That would, by definition, would have to come to the board, to have somebody on the board sign it, so we can define.
Yeah, the typical practice in school districts across the state is that the finance manager signs off on those things for the superintendent.
For the superintendent.
But not to,
And
that's one
we
way
can-
of doing it, not
right.
to say that that's the way it needs to be done.
Right. But as long as we get that research, we can figure out
Yep.
how we want to document it and how we want to lay it out, so.
Yep.
That, just wanted to bring that forward, and I think that was scheduled for February?
Friday, February 2nd, 1
Second.
o'clock.
Anybody else want to do that? I don't mind doing it. Okay. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that forward. The FMR, another rendition. This one here is, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points. When I looked down through it, I didn't see anything in here that really brought any near heart palpitations or anything to get excited about. The one piece, if you notice the in the expenditure piece, the special ed is a couple $100,000 above what we had expected. What you don't find is in the expenses, you don't find other offsetting expenses that had savings to that level. That the delta at the bottom was what, $14,000, if I remember the 15,000.
15, yeah.
But what happens is when you get the expenses in the special ed, the revenues go up. So on the second page of this, you can see where the revenues expectation was 1.8 million to start, and it's now over almost 1.95. So the offsetting revenues that come in based on the special ed expenses, depending on how acute they are, makes up for a lot of that balance. So as I look down through here, though, there was really not a whole lot else that really shook out as having anything really strange or odd. So,
And it's halfway through the year.
and we're halfway
it's
through the
end
year.
of quarter
so.
2,
yeah.
so things will, as always, continue to kind of get clearer and more tightened up as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year.
And the one variable that we do have, that Rebecca had mentioned as we started, is again the HRA and the feedback above the employee first dollars in, and we just have no idea what to expect, how to plan. But we did the 6 months, and we'll see where that goes. We do have the cushion in the $200,000 that's in the general fund, for rainy day fund, if you will. So that's a little bit of a safety net should anything get out of balance on that. But we don't expect that. Any other questions on that report?
Good.
Okay. All right. So then section B here, the adoption of the budget. And so Rebecca, you want to join us? We would love to have you front and center. or at least front
So-
and side.
Yeah, and I can start and tee up the documents that you had in the agenda packet. You had the 3 looks that you had seen throughout the budget cycle process, which is the by program, by function, and by object. And then the 4th page was included the investments and then shows the estimated tax impact. So it has the CLA, it has our equalized pupil number, it has our estimated revenues, all those numbers that we can plug in and do the very best that we can with the information that we have at this moment to give the board and give the public the estimated tax impact, which in this case is 2.9%. So overall, we're looking at an increase to the budget on the expense side of $927,000, and $824. With the bulk of that, as you know, throughout the process, being incurred in special education, a little over 700 of that. And because our CLA only dipped a little bit, and because our equalized pupil count went up pretty significantly, that's what's keeping that tax impact at a lower rate than we're seeing, than we expected, and also than we're seeing around the region and around the state. And then the last page that you had in there is the 3-year comparison, which just gives a lot of the same numbers that are in the previous documents and compares them to the past couple of years, so you can see the deltas from left to right there. Any questions for Rebecca or I about program, function, object, tax impact, 3-year comparison?
In general, there's just, there isn't a lot of change since we met last. That's why we didn't meet last week.
Right.
I mean, that still is the case.
Yep.
Okay. There have been some very minor adjustments, but we're gonna see those as we go anyway.
Yeah, one of them was the municipal retirement changed by like 0.02%, but to go through and change the budget at this point for that little amount, and, you know, it'll change when we hire as well, so nothing significant. The really thing that's gonna drive it is the closure of the legislature and what the yield comes out to be, and that'll really drive what the tax rate will end up being, and that's totally out of our control right now.
And a lot of that is dependent on what our fellow districts do in terms of spending. You know, I mean, the governor has asked for the overall spending to stay at 2.5% or less. So we
That's
won't know that.
2.5% per equalized.
Ed spending.
Ed spending.
Ed spending,
Yeah.
2.5.
So, can I just review to get me back to last December, when last we were talking about this? So the percentage of increase, we'll go to this. So the percentage of, so for tax impact is a 2.9.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay,
Based on the information we have right now.
right. And we did go down in per pupil spending, right?
Correct.
Correct. A couple $100, and the increase in the budget itself is 5.8% as an increase, but the impact on our taxpayers is only 2.9%.
Correct.
5.8 on the expense side.
Wow. And we got all the not all of them, but the most prioritized, what was most essential investments.
Correct.
Okay. Dang.
Good synopsis.
Right? Then I'm just needed to make sure that's real. Like, that just sounds like
Well, and I think
y'all did a lot of great work trying to get down to what was most essential to be able to add those things and not have it impact our tax, our communities
Right,
much.
and I think you hit upon a really important point, which will be important to share with the broader community, which is the decrease in the spending per equalized pupil.
Yeah, which is both, again, Julian will always be a part of voice. Those of you that when we were going and saying, like, we spend really low per pupil. It's like, is that something to be proud of?
Right.
Like in terms of what our students need. And I think that we've done a great job of making sure, y'all have done a great job of making sure that the mental health, the emotional health, and the academic health has been considered in the increases of staff,
Mhm.
you know, and therefore the support of faculty and the holistic support of our students, and therefore the holistic support of our organization. So I appreciate that. Good to point out.
So that, your 4 sentences there will be the essence of the newsletter for February.
Did you write those down? 'Cause I don't
I
know.
got it all right
Because
here.
it's out, it's gone.
I tell you, if Colin got it, we're all set. And the light's on, so we gotta.
Oh,
do
that's
it.
good
Going
news.
back
It's
now.
just good news.
This is interactive TV. And so the only other thing while we're touching the 2 subjects, I'm just wondering if we need something for the newsletter for February based on the work
Yeah,
that
you're
you
on it,
guys are
didn't you?
doing.
Didn't you send
Yep,
that email
yep,
that you're doing?
Yep, so we got that, and we'll put that in there. All right, good. So based on that and having this be an action item to accept, we
Wow.
would be accepting the budget as we've put it together and as it's presented here. And then we have to adopt the budget warnings themselves as well, which I think we'll get to those in a second.
Yep.
So I would accept a motion to accept this Winooski School District 18-19 budget as has been proposed tonight.
So moved.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you for all the hard work as well.
Thank you.
The
Thank you too.
budget, the budget warnings, these are what we'll end up seeing on the ballot itself as well as.
Right, so this is the statutory language that has to go out into the annual report that gets distributed and posted around the city and on our website and so forth. And so the top really just talks to change of dates and years and everything. It's all the same as it has been in terms of site and time for presentations. And then Article 1 through 3 are the same as normal, and then down to the Australian ballot. So basically, in Article 4, we have the estimated federal funds that we believe we will receive of $2,376,213, and that has no tax impact, but it must be voted upon. And then Article 5 is the actual school budget itself, which, as we said a bit earlier, $16,837,357. And last year was the first year where we were statutorily required to put in the spending per equalized pupil, which, as we mentioned, went down about 1.2%. So that is now included in Article 5. And we need the board to formally approve this warning, and then that triggers us to compile the annual report, which we've already been working on, and put all the charts and the numbers and the audits and all the information, great information about our district together to get it out to the public.
So with that, then I would accept a motion to accept the budget warnings as written.
So move.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good, thank you again. And then discussion on a review of the annual report to the voters. That's the rest of the package that's in that annual report. I haven't gotten my annual, hey Mike, dear Mike letter, you owe this to me by February, whatever, but that'll be coming, so I do have that.
It'll be before February, sorry.
I know. Yeah, I expect it. And then, like Sean said, it's all the rest of the information that gets put together based on, it's pretty much a standard package at
It
this
is,
point, right?
and this, if you'll notice, when you go to the second page, that has not been updated yet. So this is the annual report from last year. So the warning you saw will be this page with the updated information. And then most of this is financial information that we're required to include. We also take the opportunity for a message from the board president. We share a lot of wonderful pictures of the things that our students and staff are doing. And we list our staff and education. But for the most part, it is the financial Bible to the school district.
Nice, is that new?
No, it's just the place that it exists.
Sorry for our side conversation.
So basically, all I was looking for was if anybody looked at this and said, hey, should we include this, that, or the other thing, or if they have any ideas, in which case I would respond and say, that's wonderful, let's consider that for next year, because we really start getting this to press early next week in order to meet some of the deadlines.
Right.
But it is something that, it's not fixed. We can add as many pages to it as long as we have the required documents in it. If we want to, shout about some of the amazing things that are happening in a different way than they're already done.
I thought it was extremely informative. I read all through it. I didn't think there was anything that needed to be added. I was confused because why is this last year's? But okay, now I understand.
Have to get to this point before we know what the final details really are.
Yeah.
All right, good. That was only a discussion.
Right, so all
so-
the budgetary informational meetings will be updated.
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of budget and district vote and all that, have we talked to the city about a community dinner to do the presentation?
Yes, city manager Jessie and I talked about it this week, and she is going to organize the talk to Winooski Prevention about the community meeting in February. We'll also put a time together to co-present at the senior center, and also coordinate the annual meeting presentation.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. Does that and then we have one more newsletter to get the information out. Should we need to make sure we get more information out? So.
Yeah, and then there's the budget flyer that.
On the budget flyer.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Any other thoughts on that piece? Okay. Section 7 here is the winter transportation pilot agreement. We had agreed and approved in November, conditional on a few items, and when that information came back, it forced us to take a slightly different tack. So Sean, I'll turn the rest of that one.
Yeah, so my apologies for not having this in the packet. We did not get it back in our hot little hands until late Monday. And as I mentioned in my report to the board, there was quite a bit of process that happened back and forth between the Agency of Education and South Burlington and ourselves. And, we were doing everything by the book, going through the RFP process. And then as it turns out, when this finally got to the agency level, they said, oh, you didn't really need to do that. There's a statute that says that you can do joint agreements. And then we said, oh, great, do you have a copy of one of those that we can use? And they said, no, we don't have one. So that's the next set of wrangling that happened where, South Burlington and us worked together, and Rebecca and their business manager and their lawyer and so forth. And this is now what we have for you. So in the end, this joint agreement reflects all of the elements that you approved in the bid in November. The figures are all the same. There may be a few more items of legalese in here that are covered. But our recommendation to you is, number one, someone will have to make a motion to repeal the bid that you approved in November. Number two, someone would need to make a motion to authorize me to sign on the behalf of the board to enter into this joint school district agreement.
what does this mean in terms of the South Burlington kind of, like, you know, we went through their board of trustees and, or sorry.
So
their
they
school-
will be doing the same thing next week at their meeting.
Should we be there so that they don't hedge?
My understanding right now is that that is not a concern at all from their superintendent. Yeah, but I will check in again because they are planning on, he has been in communication with his board chair. And although they're not going to finalize the agreement until Wednesday, we are starting transportation on Tuesday.
Okay.
And there's nothing in here that would be an issue with that, right?
No.
Okay. And they did settle the insurance piece with Visbit, having
Yes.
coverage from different districts. Okay.
Yep.
So we're all set with that.
Mm-hmm.
So when it, South Burlington closes its school, does that mean the buses run or will not run? Is it based just solely on Winooski?
They will still go.
Go up to them?
I had the pleasure of meeting the bus drivers, and I took a ride on the bus and went around Winooski, and they're very well equipped and ready to do it. And
Great.
the gentlemen that are driving the bus are actually very excited. They're all part-timers, so they need extra time, and I think they'll do a really nice job.
All right. So we have two pieces of business associated with this, and you had some wording that we need. We just
Yeah.
need to repeal.
So someone will need to make a motion to repeal the transportation bid that was approved on November 8th of 2017.
I move to repeal the transportation bid that we approved on November 8th of 2017.
Any other discussion or information needed? Okay. All those in favor of repealing? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's repealed.
And then I will need someone to make a motion to authorize the superintendent to enter into a joint agreement with the South Burlington School District for the purpose of transportation.
I'll do that too. I'll make the motion to give permission to the superintendent to approve the joint agreement, the transportation joint agreement between Winooski and South Burlington.
Motion, any other thoughts or needs, information? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Great, thank you.
rearranged our motions. All right. Thank you, Sean, for following that one through and cleaning it up. Appreciate that.
It's been a lot of muscle to get this pilot going.
Yep.
We got our clickers and we got our vests today.
And we got our students to help
we got our
do some work.
students, and we'll be meeting on Friday with the Parents and Youth for Change to put the final details down.
You've been receptive to whatever your suggestions on being part of the bus?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we're still working through some of the background check process, you know, because to have volunteers, we have to go through that.
Are there enough volunteers? Because I would think that with this population too, you know, just thinking like of availability, you know, that's one of the
Right.
struggles that we.
Yeah, they're working on building that capacity.
Yeah, that's going to be hard.
Yeah, but we're also prepared to kind of pitch in the initial stages and help out to make sure that it gets going. And
Great.
yeah.
All right. Anything else? All right, we'll move into governance processes. Alex, we'll turn this over to you for a student report.
Okay. So I hope everyone had happy holidays and a new year. And this week we're starting Expo, so like a midterms for students, pretty much. Everyone's preparing either by either presenting a essay they have written and performing it in a speech, or a presentation where either you can show off a project from one of your classes. And that's, I'm pretty sure you in the superintendent report there's already a detailed description of Expo. So moving on from that, since
Did you do one?
Yeah, what's your topic?
since I don't really have the morning classes to be able to do a speech,
Because you're at Tech.
Yeah, I'm at Tech. So I'll be doing 2 presentations. One from iLab, which is a independent project I worked on with an ROV. So it's an underwater remote vehicle where I can either, I guess, right now, like, since it's a basic one without, like, everything, we just have it just floating in water. So I guess it would be cool to show that off in class. And my second one would be for my sports studio class where we are showing motor complexes, where I discuss abilities that we learned from our physical education. So either from agility, hand-eye coordination, or any motor complex skills to show off to students. So since half the semester, like we're almost into our second semester, me and Shauna are talking about starting the new student representative process to replace me. Yeah. I was going to talk about the pilot program Miss Lindsay was talking about, but she explained it really well. And that's kind of... But yeah, using all those clubs that she's thinking about, making credit available for students. Prom committee has started, and a student committee has set up a 50-cent cupcake fundraiser to help support prom. A government class is starting did a Bernie Sanders State of the Union essay where they would write a 500-word essay to either like enter into a contest to see if they can speak with Bernie Sanders and be presented their essays in the State of the Union where Donald Trump will be.
And Moose was a runner-up last year or something?
He won runner-up, so
Yeah.
second place.
And Rainbow, I think, was an honorable mention.
Yeah.
So hoping this year we could get first place. Yeah. So during advisory, we had for the half day, we talked about some ideas that people were concerned about at the school, and 2 of the opinions that students have given was that an extra or having middle school counselor help the high school, because lots of students when they're trying to change their schedules are being backed up. Like for example, today I went in myself and had 3 other students waiting right behind me. It took up a lot of time. And
Just to get your second semester classes.
yeah, second
So-
semester classes or like dual enrollment for CCB classes. Another thing was that students didn't really have like somewhat of a problem with the half days, because since half days aren't really a learning education process anymore because we're doing field trips. I guess it's good in a way where we get a relaxing day, half day we get. But in a way, lots more students don't show up on these half days. So it's kind of, we want, me and a student were talking about it, and we would like to have like half and half, where sometimes we would have a trip if it's a stressful week. So like during Expo week is a prime example of when we should get a break. But like when nothing's happening, like maybe like in the middle of the semester where not many stress-inducing projects are available, we could do classes, and these would help catch up students that missed some days or were sick for others. Also, discussing about the half day, we actually had 3 field trips going on. One to the edge for swimming and basketball. Another one for ice skating at the ice rink down at Ledger Park, I believe. And the last one was rock climbing at Metro Rock. And that's my student report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Alex?
Some fun stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
Good sitting with you, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice that the students want more rigor. It's something to talk about. Like it's something that's pretty cool. you
The
know?
students are asking for more rigor.
They're asking for
Yeah.
like, I want more school. Like maybe y'all like are different, but like that just seems odd to me. You know, like that. You know, we've got a special population, and so I mean, it's kind of special about this district. Sorry, I'm just gonna bask in
No,
that.
I like it. Thank you
no,
for doing that.
it's, yeah,
It's
it's
good,
definitely
important to
a
point it out.
perspective that you
Yeah.
can be lost in, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, great. All right. Next item on here is one of the items in our annual agenda, and that is the mid-year progress update. And so I just wanted to reflect, because 12 months, when you meet once a month and then 6 times during budget season, and another miscellaneous time, flies. It doesn't last long. But I'd like to reflect back from our retreat in September and then come forward to see where we are. And, you know, Tori and Alex, I know you guys have been doing quite a bit of work with the community, student involvement. And actually we have a path looking forward at this point to see where we take this thing next. Progress there? I mean, do you have anything new that
We're meeting tomorrow night, but we do have,
with the PTO group?
well, PTO's next week. I did talk with Lydia today, and so
Okay.
they're gonna squeeze us in for next Wednesday.
Okay.
If that works for both of us, otherwise we can do it February. But I think what we need to do is get in touch with you around the 8th graders, 10th graders, 12th graders, when that would work, sort of like end of January. We'll get semester 2 started, right, beginning of February, and set up some maybe full day, like, and I think, so we're gonna talk tomorrow to really look at, I would think timing, like in terms of, like, I know, like for me, it'd be great to do like a big full day, take a Russell day and like do a big full day of doing multiple conversations in the school. So it's kind of cool to think about, we're really starting with student voice. And then we're branching out into what our meeting with the PTO is going to be about is, one, doing it with them, is really sharing the questions with them, and also starting to build connections on who can we start accessing so that we can see what voices we have access to, what voices we need to do a little bit more in-depth, work around getting other voices to the table. So just get that started. And again, the range is from now until May, so we do have time, because I just want to make sure we're scooping in as many voices as possible and really taking our time with it,
Right.
because it's a good amount of time to be
Right.
doing this. But I just want to be thorough with it, because I think these questions are
Right.
important.
And I like the timeline of May. It seems like a long way away, but it'd be here in a
Oh,
heartbeat.
be here in a heartbeat, yeah.
But I also want to make sure you don't get constrained by stopping in May if you think you have to.
Right,
Or,
I think that this will
continuing
be
if
an
you have
ongoing
to,
process.
and it should be, right.
Yeah,
So-
and I think we'll be refining our design throughout the whole process. The students are going to teach us a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's good to start with them, because they'll be our best teachers in
Mhm.
terms of how tightly we are in facilitation, what answers we're getting, how we're going to, use that information, how we start seeing themes, that sort of thing. So it's flexible,
Yeah.
and there's a
that's-
pathway, and it's totally flexible. We
At-
will
at-
learn as we go.
At the other end, we will be in a different, better place
Yeah.
with more knowledge about where we
Absolutely.
think we want to go from there.
And we
So,
will try, we will fail, we will try again, fail, reflect, we're in the design process.
Yeah. So the other piece.
And there'll be a feedback.
Right,
We
right.
can't.
Always a feedback.
There will
loop.
always be a feedback.
With a
loop.
statistician, you can't not have a feedback loop in systems.
System perspective, you always have a
You
feedback
have to, right? Because we know the
Um,
systems that don't have those feedback loops, and they're not fun to be a part of.
The feedback, yeah. So the only other, I adjusted and updated the superintendent survey to change the scale. I'll run that by you, Alex. I know you had some questions about, or thoughts about that. I did change the to ends that we had mentioned. You wanted it said vision and mission now, and wanted it changed to vision and ends to tie them together, but it's just the terminology used, so I made that
Right.
change. But otherwise, like to go out later into January. I think we had decided that later in January would be a good time to do that. It'll be a third iteration of about the exact same survey for us, and I think you've been using it as well. Or have you used it?
I haven't used it
Okay.
separately. We have a
Okay.
different one, different but similar, that we
All right.
use with the rest of the leadership
All
team.
right, so this will be our third iteration, and then we can compile that and work through it when we get the data completed. So hopefully by the end of January, we may have something for February. It's just another piece of feedback we get.
I just had an additional thought about the community conversations and the community dinners, is that it would probably be good for us to do a pitch at the February community dinner and then possibly host one March and April, but to use that as a vehicle, one, for a particular conversation.
Mhm.
And anyway, and then we also probably need to talk about dollars, in terms of our board dollars, if we have dollars to spend on some, obviously supplies, but possibly hosting a community dinner, that sort of thing. So I think we'll need to touch
Mhm.
on those things.
Yep,
Just need to
definitely
throw that in there for us.
something that's open for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, don't hold back, as I think we need to get that feedback, so.
Yeah. Exciting.
It's, it'll start the discussion on how do we do it and what kinds of things we learn, how do we do it again, so.
So just to get
Right.
back to, was for me, if there's any revisions, I think this item was around the mid-year progress, right? Is that
Yeah.
where it started?
Yes.
So is there anything that you need me to do with this document? Is there any revisions or that you'd like
The
done? or-
self-assessment piece.
Yeah.
My only
Oh.
question is when it says the meeting was well attended, do you mean well attended by board members or well attended by community members?
It would have to be us. It's that we have a quorum, that we have a quorum when we need it.
And well attended is a quorum. Because
Yes.
we got into that where we think it needed to be perfect attendance.
Yeah.
But it really is making sure that we have.
It has to be a quorum, right.
Ideally, yes, but, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have real good attendance for, in general, we're at 100%, so
Mhm.
so otherwise,
We have really concrete data about it too, because all you gotta really, we could put that together through the minutes. Yeah.
Or go through all the videos.
That sounds like a lot more fun.
noses
What was I
in
wearing
the-
that day?
Okay, good. So we can look to incorporate the self-assessment here as we go forward.
Okay.
All right. Next item here then is planning a meeting. Legislators come in next month, and Sean has some items on what are they dealing with at this point, which is a fair list to prep our thoughts and have us ready for these guys when they do come in.
Okay.
Will we be
I have a broad question before we can get through the list is, as we've been talking about the general ed fund that got dipped into, right, which is what the shortfall is?
Am I correct in knowing or understanding that the general ed fund has a shortfall because those monies were used for something else? Is it clear what those monies were used for? By whom and for what?
They were. I don't know that you could get to that level of specificity. They were used to support the educational spending for those particular years, which would have been FY18 and FY17.
So it was
So I don't-
used within education.
It's
Yes.
a shortfall in the funding of the
Yeah.
education as
Okay.
needed by the state.
Okay, so it wasn't taken
No.
and then
to spend
used somewhere
somewhere
else at other shortfalls.
No, and one of the other factors that you have to remember is that all those tax incentives from Act 46 are coming to bear right now too.
Because that's costly.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was wondering, as we're talking about having to, the tax dollars that our communities also
spending is going to help recover that shortfall. And I just wanted to make sure that that recovery was based in education, because they're
Yeah.
education dollars, and it wasn't sort of something that was
Yeah.
taken out and paid for something else for the state.
No.
If I remember the last few years right in the conversations, the state has been putting money from the general fund into education to prop it up a little bit, and that
But the
those monies now are not sufficient enough to cover the entire
Mhm.
gap.
But
so.
the percentage that they have been taking over time from the general fund into the education fund has been declining. The percentage.
So they're getting
Of
closer.
what they're taking
Yes.
from their state, from the state general fund
Yeah.
into education fund,
Yeah.
they keep, they're
Yeah.
slowing that drip.
So it's been, I think it was like, it's gone from 37% to 32 or something like that over the last 10
Okay.
years. Or
Okay, thanks for the clarity. Okay, onward. Senate and House bill list.
Yep.
So this is just a list. They publish this through the Agency of Education and VSA and VSBA, and this is basically the stuff that is on the docket as of Monday, or last Friday, sorry, the 5th, as potential bills that they would be considering. So I just wanted you to have this in your hands, so that you could review this, so then when we do invite the legislators to come in, you'll know exactly what is coming down the pike that you might want to talk to them about.
And
The labor negotiation thing is interesting, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? Now that you've been through it.
I think it would be interesting for our community to see that window, see inside that window.
To increase transparency.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, does this mean that the collective insurance is off the table? It's not coming back again?
I wouldn't discount that completely. I just don't think that anybody has
That's more minutes.
written anything yet. Yeah.
all right. So, from an advocacy standpoint, when we do have Clem and Diana, will you be extending the invite, or do you want
I
me
can
to
do that. Sure.
I can. Okay.
No, I'll do it.
All right. Right, so that'll be a good discussion again. We had a pretty good discussion with them last year. There were some pretty hot topics. So. All right. And then the last one, we had talked about the board monitoring report 4.3 review here. And what was in the package is just a very, very small update in this one. Everything in here is exactly as it was, except for 4.3.3, I believe, didn't I? Oh, no, okay, so in here we had talked about section 4.3.3. I did not put anything in here on a data or conclusion. But my comment on the aside is I think we were gonna dump that section, or when we reviewed the policy again, because it looks like that section is just abdicating all responsibility of the board, pushing everything always back into the superintendent, from the way that I had read it. So that's why I had left that one blank. The other only change, I think, was 4.3.4, and just having data based on input from the superintendent for matters that come to the board, they get pushed back rather than trying to be dealt with by the board. And those are the two pieces there. So that's the only change in that one. And
So this is for discussion, I think, this
yep,
month.
this
and
was
then-
just discussion. It'll
Yeah.
come back through consent on this one next month. Any thoughts on that one? Comments? All right, and I believe we only have 3 left, if I remember right. They're mostly written, so I may reach out to see if I can get some help doing the final edit on those just to make sure we get that first pass. So I'll get those out quickly, and hopefully we can close those out, because to me the second time around on these gives you time to think more clearly about what they are, what they really mean, what we want to do with them, if anything, change them, keep them. So, all right, and then down into the last section of the community engagement. Anything recent activities? And we had already talked about the community engagement forums, I think briefly in our update, so I think that will cover that section. Anything else? Anything we missed? Anything you want to see in next month's agenda that's not necessarily already there? Okay.
This was an efficient meeting tonight, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know if efficient meeting tonight, because we got through the budget, but we also took 6 sessions to work through that one, so it
That's
helps.
We're
to-
reaping the benefits right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, that's
We're
right,
reaping
that's
the
right. This
benefits.
is meant to be just a stamp on the hard work we've already done. All right, no executive session at this point, and with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Bye.
Okay, opposed? All right. January meeting complete?
All right, great.
Sean, again, thanks for the efficient budget
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'll put that together.
Okay.
Sean, thanks for the efficient budget stuff that y'all all did. That was like streamlined and great.
Yeah, I feel like Rebecca and I were talking about that, and because of all the other stuff that has happened in the last 6 months with health